Hello, and thank you for joining us for the first webinar in our Early Learning Partnership series, Introduction to Early Learning Partnerships. My name is Cassie Longoria, and I am an Early Childhood Education Program Specialist with the Texas Education Agency. Today, we will be discussing the purpose and overview of partnerships, implications from House Bill 3, ideas for when to partner, and information on types of partnerships and different funding models. Again, my name is Cassie Longoria, and I'm an Early Childhood Education Program Specialist with TEA. I specialize in early learning partnerships and manage a grant related to partnerships. So I highly encourage you to reach out at any time if you have any questions or if there's anything I can do to assist with partnerships you may be exploring. My contact information is listed here on this page. Next, I will do an overview of partnerships. Early learning partnerships are formal agreements between local education agencies, early learning centers, and/or Head Start programs to provide pre-kindergarten or comprehensive services. In these partnerships, children are dually enrolled, and therefore, two or more sources of funding are blended together to provide a full day and/or a full year of care and education. Local education agencies, early learning centers, and Head Start programs can also provide informal partnerships in which there's collaboration on things like professional development or materials, curriculum, assessment. But for the purposes of this webinar, we will be discussing formal agreements in which children are dually enrolled. Partnerships can help increase access and enrollment. They allow for parents to have increased options for pre-K, options in different locations of the community, with extended hours, or with comprehensive services. They also increase quality. Each partner brings their own expertise to the table to provide an even higher quality experience for students and families. LEAs bring their expertise of public pre-kindergarten, and early learning and Head Start programs bring their expertise of child development, family engagement, and other services for children birth to 5 years. Together, they can provide a really high quality experience for students and families. Lastly, they also increase alignment between entities. LEAs, early learning centers, and Head Start programs can create an easier transition for students and families between these programs. Next, I'm going to talk about House Bill 3 and the implications from this legislation on early learning partnerships. House Bill 3 requires LEAs to provide full-day pre-kindergarten for eligible 4-year-old students. It also allows LEAs to utilize partnerships to meet this full-day requirement. And it requires LEAs to explore partnerships before applying for an exemption. Exemptions may be granted if it's determined that the local education agency would be required to construct classroom facilities in order to provide pre-kindergarten, or if implementation would result in fewer eligible children being enrolled in pre-K. This would happen if, for example, the LEA serves 20 children in the morning and 20 in the afternoon for a total of 40 children, but switching to pre-K to full-day pre-K would only allow the LEA to serve 20 children. An LEA may not receive an exemption unless the LEA has solicited and considered at a public meeting proposals for partnerships with public or private entities regarding offering full-day pre-kindergarten for eligible 4-year-old students. If an LEA wants to partner to meet the full-day requirement, partners must meet one of the following eligibility requirements. They must be Texas Rising Star, 3-star or higher, nationally accredited, a Head Start program provider, a Texas School Ready participant, or they must meet the requirements under Texas Education Code 29.1532. This essentially states that if a school district contracts with a private entity for pre-kindergarten, the program must, at a minimum, comply with child care licensing standards and meet pre-kindergarten requirements. Next, I'll be discussing options for when to partner. LEAs may want to partner if they want to apply for an exemption for full-day pre-kindergarten for eligible 4-year-old students. They may also want to partner if they don't have ample facilities to accommodate all eligible 3- and 4-year-old students, or if they do not yet have a 3-year-old program or have a small 3-year-old program and want to expand. Early learning centers and Head Start programs have an increased expertise in serving younger children, so that would be beneficial to the LEA to partner with them in order to provide services for 3s. LEAs may also want to partner if they want to support early learning centers and Head Start programs in increasing kindergarten readiness, if they've identified enhanced services or expertise that an early learning center or Head Start program can provide, or if the early learning center or Head Start program serves a large percentage of 3- and 4-year-old children who are receiving child care subsidies and would also be eligible for public pre-kindergarten. Next, I will discuss different types of partnerships and funding options. LEAs, early learning centers, and Head Start programs have many options when establishing partnerships. When partnering, LEAs, early learning centers, and Head Start programs must meet the requirements of each of their respective programs in order to combine multiple sources of funding. Essentially, if you are using that source of funding, then that means you must abide by their rules and regulations. 3 different types of partnerships that we'll talk about today are LEA and Early Learning Center partnerships, LEA and Head Start program partnerships, and LEA and in-district charter program partnerships. LEAs and Early Learning Centers can partner to provide full-day pre-kindergarten with enhanced services, full-day pre-kindergarten with enhanced services and extended hours, or full-day, full-year pre-kindergarten with enhanced services or extended hours. Some early learning centers provide enhanced services that are beneficial to children and families, such as family engagement programs, parenting programs, home visiting, or other services that are beneficial to children and families. They also tend to operate longer days, allowing families to benefit from this as well. And lastly, they tend to operate during some holidays that LEAs are closed, such as spring break, winter break, or summer break, which allows families to benefit from full-year education. House Bill 3 also allows for LEAs to draw down funding for an extended school year for elementary schools. Therefore, with House Bill 3, LEAs can now pass through funding to early learning centers during the summer, whereas before they were not able to do this. Here are the different funding options for LEAs and early learning centers. For eligible 3-year-old students, you can combine foundation school program funding for 3 hours, early education allotment funding, as well as child care subsidies. The early education allotment funding is optional for 3-year-olds because House Bill 3 states that full-day pre-kindergarten is required for eligible 4-year-olds. For eligible 4-year-olds, you would combine foundation school program funding for 3 hours, the early education allotment full-day requirement, and childcare. Childcare subsidies are typically funding care and education that wraps around the LEA-funded day, so typically before or after school care. The amount of funding that passes through depends on the employer of the teacher, infrastructure costs, and services provided. One thing to note about LEA and Early Learning Center funding is that LEA funding, so the Foundation School Program funding and the Early Education Allotment and Child Care subsidies may not fund the same program hours. Like I stated before, the Child Care subsidy typically funds before school care or after school care, and the LEA funding provides funding for the official pre-kindergarten day. Child care subsidy rates received will vary depending on the number of hours funded by the LEA. So for example, if the LEA was partnering to provide pre-kindergarten for eligible 3-year-olds, they may only fund half day or 3 hours, and then the child would be eligible to receive a full-time child care subsidy rate for the remainder of the day because the day is long enough. If the LEA is partnering with a child care center to provide full-day pre-kindergarten for eligible 3s or 4s, then the child might only receive a part-time or a blended child care subsidy rate. The Early Learning Center would want to reach out to their local workforce board to determine what child care subsidy rate they are eligible to receive based on the number of hours funded by the LEA. Lastly, tuition may also be charged for hours that are not funded by the LEA or through child care subsidies. So if a family is eligible for public pre-kindergarten but not for child care subsidies, the Early Learning Center could charge tuition to help cover the cost of the rest of the day or before or after school care. In these models, typically the LEA passes through funding to the Early Learning Center, and the funding will vary depending on who employs the teacher, infrastructure costs, or other services provided. Next, I will discuss partnerships between LEAs and Head Start programs. This is very similar to partnerships between LEAs and Early Learning Centers. In these partnerships between LEAs and Head Start programs, they can provide full-day pre-kindergarten with enhanced services, full-day pre-kindergarten with enhanced services and extended hours, or full-day, full-year pre-kindergarten with enhanced services or extended hours. Head Start programs offer extensive services for families, including physical, mental, and oral health services, nutritional programs, and other basic needs services for families. There's also variations to these partnerships. The location of the program, the employer of the teacher, program duration, and services provided can vary in each of these partnerships. These are the funding options for LEAs and Head Start programs when partnering. Similar to what we discussed before with Early Learning Centers. For eligible 3-year-old students, you can combine Foundation School Program funding for 3 hours, Early Education Allotment, and Head Start program funding. The Early Education Allotment is optional for 3-year-old students because it is not required to offer full-day pre-kindergarten for eligible 3s. It's only required for eligible 4s. For eligible 4-year-old students, you can combine Foundation School Program funding for 3 hours, the Early Education Allotment to meet the full day requirement, and Head Start program funding. The main difference between LEA and Head Start partnerships and LEA and Early Learning Center partnerships is that with Head Start programs, you may fund the same hours so long as the requirements of each entity is met. It is a common misconception that LEAs and Head Start partnerships have to offer a stacked model where the LEA provides services for one part of the day and Head Start provides services for the other part of the day. These services can happen simultaneously and the funding can be used for the same hours so long as you're meeting the requirements of each entity. The last option I will discuss is LEA and in-district charter school partnerships. In this model, the LEA may partner with a nonprofit organization, a government entity, an institute of higher education, or an existing charter school to provide pre-kindergarten and additional services. The partner becomes an in-district charter school. The partner must have their own board of directors and has responsibility and authority over personnel, curriculum, calendar, and assessments. In this model, the district holds the partner accountable through a performance contract. There is a link on this slide that has a lot more information on this type of partnership that you are interested in. The funding for these types of partnerships is very similar to what we discussed before. The main difference here is that the other funding available to the in-district charter will depend on what type of entity they are. If, for example, the in-district charter is a nonprofit organization who is also an early learning center, that means they might be eligible for child care subsidies. Ultimately, it'll just depend on the type of entity that becomes the in-district charter. One thing to note here as well is that foundation school program funding for charter schools are calculated differently and bring in slightly increased funding. Also, Senate Bill 1882, which was passed in the last legislative session, provided additional funding to incentivize these types of partnerships. So there may be additional funding available, such as funding startup costs for these partnerships. And you can find out more information about this funding at the link on this slide. I will now wrap up this webinar and discuss some of the summary of partnerships. There are many scenarios in which partnerships are beneficial to LEAs, early learning centers, and Head Start programs. LEAs, early learning centers, and Head Start programs may combine funding to provide high-quality programs to students. There are many options when exploring a partnership model that is beneficial for both partners and for children and families. We will also be providing additional webinars on this topic. We know that many LEAs, early learning centers, and Head Start programs will be exploring partnerships in the years to come, and we want to provide as much guidance as possible. On this slide is a link to the early education webinar page that is on TEA's website, and we will be posting webinars on the topics listed on this slide. We'll be talking about how to get started, partnerships with early learning centers, partnerships with Head Start programs, how to build relationships, how to develop contracts, and evaluating and sustaining partnerships. Be sure to check out the link on this slide to see when those will become available. Lastly, I just want to reinforce that TEA is committed to supporting LEAs, early learning centers, and Head Start programs and their partnership efforts. Definitely contact me if you have any questions at all or if there's anything I can do to help. This is something that is a part of my main job, and I'm happy to help any LEA, Head Start program, or early learning center who is interested in exploring partnerships or needs more information. So thank you for joining us today, and I hope to talk to you all soon. Thank you.